Good morning, good evening, or good night, whichever one it is for you, whichever one it is. I'm very glad you're here to join me for this week's video. This one in particular, although this is maybe the video I'm the most nervous about making that I've ever been, because it's the video dedicated to my soul books, which to me, soul books, to explain what that means first, it's not favorite books. I have favorite books, but then I have a tier above that, which is soul books, which are books that are part of me. If you were to look at my DNA under a microscope, these books would be inscribed on there. They are books that I think about constantly, all books that I've reread at least once. You know, when something means so much to you that words fail you, that is exactly how I feel about these books, which is why I'm just hoping and praying that I'm gonna be able to actually do them justice. But yeah, I'm gonna do my absolute best. In this video, I will not be ranking things. The first two I'm gonna talk about are the clear two favorites, because there's two books that just they outrank any ranking that I could possibly create. So these two are gonna be the first, and they are in order. But after that, we're gonna go random in order, because this would be like choosing which one of my dogs I prefer or love more. There is no way I could ever choose. There is no such thing as choosing. So yeah, without further rambling, let's get right on into the video by talking about my favorite book of all time. And this is, if I could only read one singular book for all of my life, these would be the ones, because it's actually an 8-part series, which maybe that is cheating, but to me they are one collective work. It is, of course, the Heaven Official's Blessing series by Mo Xiang Tongzhe, which is completely butchering that beautiful woman's name. I'm very sorry. This is the love story of a god and a ghost king. It spans over a millennia. It is beautiful. It encompasses everything. The lore of this universe is kind of that when you die, you either dissipate, you are at peace, or there's some sort of resentment or something that's keeping you in the world that is strong enough for you to become a ghost. Depending on how extreme your obsession with that thing is, how extreme the thing is that is keeping you as a ghost, the more powerful you're going to become. There's tiers to ghosts. The most powerful tier is the tier of the Ghost King. There have only ever technically been 3 of them, one of which is one of our main characters, the love interest. And our actual main character, the one we're following at the beginning of the story, he's just ascended to the heavenly realm for the 3rd time, which means he's been kicked out of the heavenly realm 2 times, which is insane because people basically spent all of their lives trying to cultivate enough power to even become a god once. And becoming a god once is like a once in a lifetime kind of thing. Not many people ever manage to do that. And he has managed to do it 3 times. I don't want to say anything more because this is just a story you're gonna have to experience for yourself. It is absolutely different from my usual reading taste, but it is the first series that ever made me feel this way. I have reread this series every single year, all 8 books. I start on the 1st of December and then I start rereading them all into January. And I've reread them, probably this year is going to be my 5th reread, I'm pretty sure. I know them by heart. I feel like I know every single one of these characters. If I could live in any fictional world, this is where I would live. This is the story of my life. I don't think I will ever get sick of it. It is a story that makes me cry just thinking about it, just because of how much it means to me. It is the love story, in my opinion. I have never read a love story of this magnitude, of this beauty. It's the kind of thing where actions come first and then the words reinforce those actions. If this sounds like something for you, which I know for some of you, it probably doesn't, but if it does, I highly recommend Heaven Official's Blessing. They are my favorite books of all time, and by a landslide. These books have to be outside of every ranking because nothing could ever compare to me. So that is why they are in 1st place. That was Heaven Official's Blessing. And then 2nd place, the book that means the 2nd most to me, is The Letters of Vincent van Gogh, which is a compilation of letters Vincent van Gogh wrote throughout his life, predominantly the last decade of his life, which is when he actually started to paint. And this is kind of a documentation of his decline in terms of health, mentally and physically, and his process of teaching himself how to paint, being a self-taught painter, being a struggling painter, trying his absolute most to be someone of use, to do something good in the world. He started seeing life through the lens of art. It is a kind of obsession that I don't think is equaled by anything else. Maybe this is TMI, but to explain why this book means as much as it does, or these letters, I do kind of have to get into it very shortly. I have quite severe mental health issues, and every once in a while they get really, really bad. And this book found me at a time where I felt really horrible. This collection of letters and this person comforted me in a way that I have never met anywhere else. This is the only book on this list that I have never been able to reread because it hurts so much. This book is my entire heart. And while I was reading this, I started teaching myself how to paint myself. I had never thought about that before, but that quote, "Art is to console those who are broken by life," sort of sparked something in me. And so it started my journey trying to teach myself how to paint. And painting to this day is the only thing that makes my head kind of stop racing. If I hadn't discovered Van Gogh, I would never have found my love for painting. So that is another thing that means so much to me. Also, despite all of that, this collection of letters is one of the most profound collection of philosophical writings I have ever read. There is so much of life and of philosophy in here that I could never do it justice. And something that I think you should know is this is a collection of letters where you get the actual letters that Vincent van Gogh wrote, and it's interspersed by biographical information. So you get to read some letters and then you get the context of where Van Gogh was in his life at that time. What I think is very important to do though, and I urge you to do it if you do decide to pick this up, there's one lecture and it's by Ephraim Rubenstein. It's a lecture on art and on Van Gogh's life. And if you have the time, I highly urge you to watch that as well, because I think that gives you a very holistic view of who this man was. And I'm going to link it in the description, so if you're interested, maybe do check that out. That was the letters of Vincent van Gogh. And with that, the ranking portion of the video is over, because from this point onwards, I cannot rank these books. So now we're going random. We are going to start with Fyodor Dostoevsky's The Brothers Karamazov. Dostoevsky is one of my favorite authors, and The Brothers Karamazov is my favorite book by him. This means so much to me because, first of all, it's just such a complex work of philosophy, religious theory, of good and evil and life, and this exploration just of every aspect of human life you could ever possibly imagine by one of the most brilliant philosophical thinkers ever that has ever lived, in my personal opinion. I've reread it several times, but also because this is the first classic I ever read as an adult. I read Heaven Official's Blessing and The Letters of Vincent van Gogh, and then I read this one. And this is kind of the book that originated my love for classics, and it kind of shaped my reading taste. I think this is the book where my reading taste kind of originated. It is the perfect book. I will never leave it. It will never leave me. I will be loyal to this book to the end of my days. I highly, highly recommend you read The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Then we have The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. Of course, this book also has to be on this list. It's a book about a man who gets stranded in the desert and who comes across this young boy who doesn't seem to be from our planet. He comes from an asteroid in the universe, and he tells the man about his journey coming to Earth. And this story means the world to me because of all the things it has to say about humanity and human life. Because the little prince doesn't come from Earth, so he has a very unique perspective on what we have made of life and how ridiculous some of our practices are and how removed we are from what's really important and how we should really conduct ourselves in this world. It is written in such an innocent way and with so much love and compassion. It is one of the most precious and innocent and wholesome outlooks on love I have ever read. The love this little prince has for the rose he tends to on his planet. It also has this theme that you're gonna see adore in literature about responsibility, and how if you take on the responsibility of something, that responsibility is for life, and that is to be honored, and that is to be done justice. And I just think this is one of the books that I think everyone should read. It's gonna just put life into such a beautiful perspective for you. And it teaches you so much. And I think it is so valuable because of it, so philosophical and just so human. It is such a quintessentially human story. So yeah, that is The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. And then, just because we're on the theme of responsibility, of course I also have to talk about Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, which is about Victor Frankenstein, who does this scientific experiment to try to reanimate a corpse made out of different body parts from different people back to life. And he manages to do so. But then he abandons his monster. And the creature goes on to commit horrific deeds, and horrific things occur in the book. And Victor, the whole time, is very convinced that he is the victim in the story, while he's actually the perfect villain. He's the most villainous villain I have maybe ever read about. It is a story quintessentially about human responsibility and how once we take on the responsibility for something, we have that responsibility for life. And if we don't do that responsibility justice, horrific things are going to happen. This monster is humanity in its most unfiltered form. It's like a child, but in an adult's body with superhuman faculties, and therefore the ability to destroy anything and everything he comes across. And because Victor failed to instill any kind of moral compass, any kind of right or wrong into the monster is left all alone to judge that for itself. And in unleashing this unformed creature into the world, Victor causes these horrific things to happen through the being. And so this is at once the exploration of the selfishness and baseness of humanity through Victor and the consequences that can have on the world, which is expressed through what the monster ends up doing and the character of the monster. It is so philosophical, it is brilliantly executed, because this is a book that has such a clear message, but that never says the message outright. You have to kind of get to the conclusion yourself, because all of the philosophy happens off page. I just think Frankenstein is a perfect masterpiece, and no one will ever be able to convince me otherwise. Then we have Letters to a Young Poet by Rainer Maria Rilke, which this one is the English edition. I have also read it in German. And this is just a collection of letters that Rilke wrote to this young, aspiring poet who once wrote to Rilke asking for advice on how to become a writer. And Rilke took that very, very seriously. And he took that letter as a sort of opportunity to express all of his life philosophy, everything he had learned about life and love and human relationships and writing and art into these letters to this young poet. It's like a personal little Bible of sorts, because I open this book, I read its pages, and I just immediately feel at peace. The way Rilke managed to write this book, it's like The Little Prince in a way, where it puts you back on the right track. There's this quote in it that goes something like, "We must not fear our world, for it is not against us." It's become like a life motto to me, and I am so glad I have this book to go back to whenever I feel a bit lost. And yeah, I think it is just beautiful. That is Letters to a Young Poet by Rainer Maria Rilke. But it is not the only Bible I have, the only personal Bible. I hope that is not hedonistic to say, but it is the equivalent of a Bible to me. And that is the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. And before I say anything else, please, if you ever decide to read the Tao Te Ching, go for this edition, the one translated by Jonathan Starr, because of all the translations I've read the Tao Te Ching in, this is by far the best. It takes more liberty with the language. It's not a literal word-for-word translation, but it brings the point across much better, and it shows you just how much worth is to be found in the Tao Te Ching. It is the founding piece of writing for Daoism, which is, in my opinion, the most beautiful and truest form of philosophy and just outlook on life that I have ever viewed. And if I were to ever be a part of any kind of philosophy or outlook on life, Daoism would be what I would be a part of, because I think that outlook on life is the most in tune with how I see the world. And this, again, is one of those books that it gives me instant peace reading it. I think it is so profoundly wise. And it is so insane to me that this is so many millennia old and still so just accurate and so modern. It is such a modern piece of writing, although it's so ancient. Nothing will ever top this in terms of philosophy, I think. It's so beautiful, so profound, and just, yeah, instant peace. Instant peace. What else could you ever want? That is the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. Then, a bit of a different one, we have The Waves by Virginia Woolf, which is, again, Virginia Woolf is one of my favorite writers. This is my favorite book by her. It's also one of my soul books. Otherwise, I wouldn't be talking about it here. It's about a group of friends, and we meet those friends when they're still very young, and we follow them throughout their lives as they evolve as beings. And at every stage of their life, the book takes a break and it tells you about the ocean at a different point in time. So it's basically like the entire lifespan of these people corresponds to one day at the ocean. When they're still very young, the sun is just about to rise. As they're in middle age, the sun is at midday. As they're getting older, the sun is starting to set again. And it is the most beautiful way of just describing the circle of life I've ever seen. And it is an entire book just stream of consciousness writing, following these people's lives. You see this dynamic of this group of friends evolve, and you see the way they see each other, and you see where that is accurate, and you see how much of our perception of others is influenced by how we view the world. Because sometimes these people have a viewpoint on their friends who they have known their entire lives, and they are completely wrong. Because you'll see that person from an outside perspective, and then you'll be in their head, and you're gonna see what's actually going on in there, and you're gonna see just how wrong their friends were about them. And to me, that just says so much about human life and how we work as people, because we can only ever really know someone in as much as they allow us to know them. And how will we ever know if that is accurate? It's also about so many different struggles these people go through. Some of them struggle with a lot of mental health issues. There is loss, there is war. So much goes on here. These people get married, they have children, or they don't get married and don't have children. So much tragedy and hope and beauty and love and loss and friendship and falling out of contact for a while and then coming back into contact. It's so complex, so beautiful. I will never cease to be grateful and amazed at how beautifully just brilliant Virginia Woolf is. This is one of the most unique books I've ever read, one of the best books I have ever read. Once again, an absolute masterpiece. That was The Waves by Virginia Woolf. Then we have No Longer Human by Osamu Dazai, which is a book I reread whenever I feel down. Because it is one of those books I can't read at every point in time, because if I'm in a good headspace, this book will really destroy me. But if I'm in a bad headspace, this is basically the only thing that will comfort me. This is the story of Yozo, sort of his life testament of sorts, who has never felt like a human. He's always felt deeply isolated from people. He's never experienced basic needs like hunger, for example. He doesn't really know how to identify emotions properly. He doesn't know how to relate to people, which has led him to create this facade of sorts. He's decided to mask his absolute isolation and dissociation from humanity by making himself the funniest person in the room, by making people laugh, basically, making people feel good, and distracting them from who he really is. And it comes to a point where that mask is so intrinsic to him that he doesn't really know who he is anymore beside that mask. And it is a book that you can read from so many different perspectives. I think depending on where you are in your life and what you're going to go through, you're going to see in him deep mental illness and depression, or you're going to see him as a neurodivergent person. Maybe he's autistic. You can see so many different things in him, but in and of himself, he is such a deeply relatable character, in my opinion. The way this book is written, every part of it is just heartbreak, so much heartbreak and so sad. But if you are at a very low point in time, I think this book will make you feel seen, or at least it does to me. It makes me feel seen in a way that I don't really experience very often. And I think that is so valuable. And it is also just such a beautifully written story. There are passages in here that are just, I don't know, I cannot fathom anyone being able to write these passages. And I think Osamu Dazai is one of those really unique people who, a lot of his works are very autobiographical. Of course, they're not accurate to his life, but there's a lot of himself going into these works, more than with maybe any other writer I've ever read. His works are so personal and they read so personally, and I think that's why they read so real. But with a character like Yozo, it's also really clear that the way Yozo views the world and the fact that he has kind of lost sight of himself leads to him thinking he's the worst possible piece of nothingness that he could ever be. That is kind of why he doesn't even allow himself to see the good in himself. And it's only when you view him from an outside perspective that you see that he's actually an incredibly kind person. He always does his absolute best not to hurt anybody. And I think it's one of those stories that you have to read with so much compassion, and where you kind of do have to read it objectively and from an outside perspective in order to see the entire picture of who Yozo is. And I think that's a very unique thing that Dazai did with this story. I absolutely adore No Longer Human by Osamu Dazai. And then, just very quickly, because this is a series of books I have talked about quite often, we are going to be talking about The Sea of Fertility by Yukio Mishima, my favorite author of all time. After Heaven Official's Blessing, my favorite series of all time. It's made up of Spring Snow, the first book, Runaway Horses, the second book. This is my personal favorite in the series. The Temple of Dawn, which is the third book, and The Decay of the Angel, the final book. I'm only going to tell you about Spring Snow because I don't want to spoil anything for you. It's the story about Honda, who is Kiyoaki's best friend. And in the first book, we kind of follow Kiyoaki almost through Honda's lens. And Kiyoaki is set up to be this really beautiful, gifted person. He is rich and he basically has everything a person could ever wish for. And the book is kind of, to put it very loosely, about a tragic love story between Kiyoaki and the girl he falls in love with from the lens of Honda, his best friend. But it is about so much more than that. And this entire series is about so much more than that. But in order to tell you about what it is about, I would have to spoil it. So all I can say is this series of 4 books is Yukio Mishima's masterpiece. It's his life work. It's the last thing he ever wrote. He died by his own choosing the day he finished the last book in the series. It was gonna be his testament to life, his testament to his outlook on life and his philosophy. Yukio Mishima was an absolutely compelling and fascinating person all of his own, and he is my favorite writer for a reason. The way he describes philosophy, the way he sees the world and people, his focus on beauty and on tragedy, on brutality, contrasting beauty and brutality in the most unique of ways. This series has so much to say about all of that, and it is the culmination of the life work of one of the most brilliant people that has ever lived, in my opinion. It is an absolutely brilliant and so deeply underrated piece of writing. These books are connected. It is an entire story, and you will not get the entire story, and you will not know what I'm talking about unless you've read all of them, because this is an ending that I will never forget. It's the kind of ending that puts the entire thing in a different perspective, and it's an ending that makes you want to reread the entire book. This series has rereadability potential like no other series. Just mind-blowing. And again, when I will never forget, when I will never cease to reread over and over and over again. That is why it is on this list of soul books. That was The Sea of Fertility by Yukio Mishima. Another series that will forever own my heart is The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. I'm only holding up the first one. They are very heavy books, so this was how we're gonna do this. The Lord of the Rings is about Frodo, who gets tasked with basically destroying the One Ring, the ring to rule them all. Because in this world, there's a dark force, a dark lord, if you will, that is threatening to basically attain world power. And the only way he will be able to do that is by attaining the One Ring. And someone will have to take on the burden to destroy that ring. And Frodo is the one who takes on that responsibility. He is accompanied by a group of friends, and he is going to go on this huge and long and epic journey. There are going to be battles. There are going to be so many interesting characters. We're going to go through so many different towns and places. We're going to learn so much about this absolutely beautiful, unique world. This story is just, I don't know, it's beyond words to me. I feel like Tolkien is kind of a kindred spirit to me because he loves nature so much. He loves language so much. He literally created an entirely unique own language for this book. That is a level of nerdiness that I aspire to attain. That man was the nerd of all time. He has so much love for human nature, for humankind, for kindness, for love, for friendship, for nature, for being kind to the place you live in. It's about love for the place you live in, love for the people you live among. I don't even know how to express what this book is about because really it is about everything. It is also fascinating and beautifully done commentary on what a hero is and how burdensome that role of a hero is. And there is a quote specifically that Frodo says at the very end of the story that I cannot tell you because it's a spoiler, kind of, but it broke me. This story broke me. I was an absolute sobbing mess by the end of it, and I remained a sobbing mess for the entire end of the rest of that day. And I will never forget the experience of reading these books. I was so in love with it, and I remain so in love with it. It's one of my favorite stories ever. I think it is much more complex than you would probably expect if you haven't read The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. And it is also one of those things that no matter what your reading taste is, no matter what kinds of books you usually gravitate towards, I think you would love this book. I think this is a universally enjoyable book, no matter who you are. I would highly recommend it. Next, I want to talk about Piranesi by Susanna Clarke, which is about Piranesi who lives in a house. He's a sort of scholar of that house, and he documents every single occurrence, everything that's going on in the house. And the book is basically a series of log entries that Piranesi writes down. It's the kind of story where at the beginning Piranesi has no idea what's going on. And because you're reading his diary of sorts, you don't know either. So it's very confusing at the beginning, but you really need to embrace that confusion because it's all going to make so much sense at the end. Why I love this story so much is because I think it is a love letter to the human brain. How safe we are with ourselves. And I think that is all I want to say. Just absolutely stunning and gorgeous. And I adore it. And it makes me cry every time I read it. And I love Piranesi and I love Piranesi's story. And then one that I don't think I've ever talked about before, but that is also on this list, is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller, which is a retelling of Achilles' story of the Iliad. And we follow Achilles' life story through Patroclus' lens, who is Achilles' lifelong companion. And it is, of course, a love story. There is a lot of tragedy in it, but I don't think it's a tragedy. In my opinion, this is not a tragedy. In my opinion, this is about the resilience of love and also different kinds of love. Romantic love, familial love, specifically the love of mother and child. It is beautifully written. There are passages here, so many beautiful passages. And it is a story that it will never leave my head. It's ingrained inside of my brain and I would never have it any other way. That makes me cry like a little baby child, but in the best way. A way where your heart is so full that it's overflowing and that is why you're crying. That is what this story makes me feel like. And the last, I want to say 2 or 3 pages of this book, in my opinion, are some of the most beautiful pages of any book ever written. They are gorgeous and I love them. And I think you need to read The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller if you have not already. I don't think anyone would ever regret it. The White Book by Han Kang, who has very quickly also become a new all-time favorite author. The only author that has ever been able to rival Mishima. This story is Han Kang's meditation on the color white. But it's really a meditation on grief. White is kind of the representation for grief, or for sadness, or for human life, or for really anything you want the color white to be. It is so universal, and it is handled with the most compassion ever. I feel so honored to be able to live in a world that Han Kang is also alive in. This book is one that is so comforting. It kind of feels to me like No Longer Human, but whereas No Longer Human makes me feel understood in my sadness, The White Book kind of makes me feel like it's holding my sadness and stroking my sadness and healing my sadness. If that makes any sense at all. This feels like the healing version of No Longer Human. This is about a woman who, before she was ever born, her parents lost 2 children. So this woman has always felt like she would not be alive if her 2 siblings had not died. So she kind of feels like she's living in their place. And that is a burden to her because she does not really like being alive. But she is alive, and she sees that as a gift because she is basically living life for 3 people. And that is the most beautiful, heartbreaking, healing thing. So human, so symbolic, and just so unique. Incredibly, incredibly unique and beautiful. That was The White Book by Han Kang. And finally, I don't think this is gonna come as any surprise to any of you who've known me for at least a little bit. Don Quixote by Miguel de Cervantes. This is a soul book. Oh yes, it definitely is. The main character of this story is a man in his 50s who's read so many tales of knight and chivalry that he kind of goes crazy. And he starts to believe he lives in a world where he needs to restore knighthood into the world. And so he is gonna take on that burden. He is gonna become a knight. He takes a very not so gorgeous horse, and he calls himself Don Quixote de la Mancha, forces basically one of the people who live in the town he lives in to become his lackey. He's called Sancho Panza, and Sancho Panza has a donkey, and together they start traveling the country trying to restore knighthood and chivalry to the world. And Don Quixote sees tragedy and sees peril everywhere. There is no peril to be seen. So he ends up trying to save people constantly. But really what he's doing is just making everything worse for everyone involved. But he is so precious and he has the best of intentions. And he's one of those people who people would really like to hate him and find him ridiculous. And they kind of do find him ridiculous. And it's kind of actually sad to see sometimes because he doesn't even realize they're making fun of him. But they also can't quite hate him because he's just that precious. And you just cannot help but love this man. And Sancho Panza and Rocinante and just all of the characters, but specifically Don Quixote. I just adore this book. It makes me so happy. It's like a happy pill for me. I'm so, so happy I discovered this book. Those were all of my soul books. All of the books that are ingrained inside of my DNA. If these were the only books I could ever read ever again, I would be very content with life. So I think that goes to say something. I hope I was able to do them at least some justice. I expect this to have been very rambly and very incoherent at points, but I hope you were able to find some coherence in the incoherency, if that is even how you say that. Do you have such a thing as soul books? Which are they? I would be so happy to know because I think that says a lot about a person. Again, I'm very grateful you were here. I'm already looking forward to seeing you again next week. I hope you're having a nice day. If you are not having a nice day, that is fine too. I'm thinking about you either way. And yeah, just thank you. I feel like the luckiest girl in the world because you are here and because we can talk about books. How cool is that? So yeah, thank you and bye-bye.